Hi, welcome to the tutorial on setting up and processing advanced variable numerator multi-tiered allocations for a joint venture. The objectives of this tutorial are to understand advanced variable numerator multi-tiered allocations for joint ventures, set up specifications to allocate the expense to joint venture business units, and compute and review the allocated amounts. The indirect costs incurred by the managing partner can be allocated to one or more business units that benefited from the cost. The indirect cost will only be included in the distribution process after the costs are allocated. After the costs are allocated to the business units, the allocated amounts are distributed to the partners, including the managing partner. Advanced variable numerator allocations is a feature in the JD Edwards financials system that enables you to perform various types of allocations. Use the allocation type joint venture based allocations to allocate indirect costs to the joint venture. The system enables you to allocate indirect cost to a single tier or to multiple tiers in the joint venture hierarchy. In this tutorial, you will allocate indirect cost to two tiers of business units in the hierarchy. You will allocate an expense from the joint venture to business units on the first level and further allocate those expenses to the child business units on the second level. To use the joint venture based allocations, you must set up the following specifications. Set up 4 versions for each of these programs. The select F0902 source basis, the RO9-123B program, and the select F09J30S, the source basis, the RO9J30S program. 2 versions of each of these programs will be used for the first level of allocation and the other 2 for the second level of allocation. You will use the data selection of these versions to specify the source and basis data for the 2 allocation levels. To create the versions for the RO9-123B program, access the Advanced Variable Numerator Allocation Setup program, PO9-123B, and then click the button Create Source Basis Data Selection Versions for Account Balance Based Allocations. On the Add Version form, enter a version and version title. For each allocation level, you will create one version to select the source transactions from the account balances table FO902 and another version to select the transactions for the based on factor or the basis from the FO902 table. Provide identifiable names for the versions and version titles for each level. Then, in the source data selection form for the first allocation level, specify the object accounts that the system will use to select the source expense transactions to allocate. For example, if you want to allocate the equipment maintenance expense from the joint venture business unit 980000 to its child business units, then your data selection must include the object account for the equipment maintenance expense for business unit 980000. In the basis data selection form for the first allocation level, specify the object accounts that the system will use to select the basis on which the expense will be allocated, and specify the joint venture parent business unit in the Specify Advanced Variable Numerator Computation program, PO9123. For example, if the equipment maintenance expense is to be allocated based on the hourly equipment usage, then your data selection must include the object account for tracking the hourly equipment usage for the business unit 980000. Next, set up the data selection for the second level of allocation to allocate the equipment maintenance expense from the business unit 982000 to its child business units based on the equipment usage hours. Next, set up the source and basis versions for the RO9J30S program. For this tutorial, we will set up only one version for each of the source and basis to use for both the allocation levels. The RO9J30S program enables you to select the joint venture data to be combined with the data selected from the account balances table. To access the RO9J30S program, click the button Create Source Basis Joint Venture Data Selection Versions for Joint Venture Base Allocations. Set up the data selections for the source and basis versions. In our example, since we are allocating the equipment maintenance expense from the project business units to child business units within the same joint venture, you will specify the joint venture name in both the source and basis data selection forms. Now, you will create two allocation rules, one for the first allocation level and the other for the second allocation level. Then add the versions of the RO9123B and the RO9J30S programs to the rules. To create the allocation rule, access the Advanced Variable Numerator program, PO9123. On the Specify Advanced Variable Numerator computation form, specify the allocation type as Joint Venture Base Allocation. In the allocation rule for the first level, enter 1 in the posting sequence field. You use this field to control the sequence for multi-tiered allocations. Enter a posting group of 20. The posting group is used to group multi-tiered allocations. On the Source Basis tab, complete the fields in the 4 sections. In the Data Selection field on the Source Specifications section of the form, specify the version of the RO9123B program that you have created for the first allocation level. Use the other fields to add additional filters to the source account balances data selected using the source version of the RO9123B program. Similarly, specify the basis version of the RO9123B program for the first allocation level and use the other fields to add additional filters to the data selected using this program. Then, in the data selection fields on the joint venture section of the form, specify the source and basis versions of the RO9J30S program that you have created, and use the other fields to add additional filters to the selected source and basis joint venture data. You have created the allocation rule for the first level. Similarly, create the allocation rule for the second level. In the posting sequence field, enter 2 to specify that this rule is for the second allocation level. Enter a posting group of 20. Then, complete the fields in the Source Basis tab. To compute the allocation and review the allocation entries, run the Compute Advanced Variable Numerator Allocations program, RO9123. Use the PDF report of your RO9123 batch to review information about the allocated amounts or units. You can review the allocation entries using the Allocations Journal Review Program, PO11. To learn more about how to set up and process multi-tiered allocations for a joint venture, visit the set of task-based tutorials, Allocating Expense Across a Joint Venture Based on Usage Hours in the Learning Path, Creating and Managing Joint Ventures in JD Edwards EnterpriseOne. You can access the learning path from learnjde.com. Thanks for watching.